In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create a rather unusual frame. First thing I'm going to do is ensure that the foreground and background colors in the toolbox are their default values. You can do this by pressing D on the keyboard. Mine are already set to the black on white, which are the default values. Next, I'm going to create a blank layer above this image of the three girls walking. So in the Layers palette, I'll click on the Create New Layer icon. And then I'll rename this new layer Canvas, followed by pressing the Enter key. And then I want to fill this canvas with white. So I'll hold the Control key pressed and then press the backspace key, and we have filled the canvas layer with white. Next, we want to create a new style paintbrush. So I'm going to select the paintbrush tool by clicking on its icon in the upper left corner of the Draw section of the toolbox, and in the resulting options panel, ensure that I have the brush tool selected, and then click on the palette selection for brushes and ensure that I have the default brushes selected, and I want a 3-pixel brush, a very small brush. And I clicked on the 5 by mistake, but I'll just change it here to a 3. And I want it to be a hard edge brush. So hard edge and 3 pixels in size, 100% opacity are the correct values. I'm going to click and drag a brush on the white canvas we have. I'm going to start about a ½ inch down from the top, click and hold the Shift key down and drag. Now it's important to hold the Shift key down. And when I get to about a ½ inch from the bottom, I'll release the mouse and then the Shift key. And the reason I held the Shift key down is I wanted to ensure that the line or brush that we're making is straight. Next, I'll click on the Marquee Selection tool in the top right corner of the Select section of the toolbox. Come down to the resulting options panel, ensure I have the rectangular marquee tool selected as opposed to the elliptical marquee tool. And then I'll draw a rather loose selection around the line we drew a moment ago and release the mouse. Then I want to save this selection of the straight line as a brush. So I'll click on Edit, come down to Define Brush from Selection, click. Then I'll rename the brush My Brush, and then click the OK button. The brush is saved in the palette that was last used, which was the default brushes palette. So if I go back to the brush tool and then open the default brushes palette, which is already selected, and come way down to the bottom, you'll see that there's a brush here at the bottom named My Brush. It's the brush we just created. I'm going to double click on that brush. Double-clicking selects the brush and closes the palette at the same time. I'm going to set the size to 100 pixels, and I'll just click and drag over the number and type in 100. I no longer need this canvas of the brush, so I'm going to delete it by dragging the layer thumbnail to the Delete Layer icon, which looks like a little trash can at the top of the Layers panel. I no longer need the outline of the selection that we made earlier, so I'll press Control D on the keyboard and that'll make the outline go away. So now we're back to just having the image of the three girls on the screen with a selected brush of 100 pixels and the brush being the new brush we created. Next, I'm going to add a solid color layer above our image of the three girls. So I'll click on the Create New Fill and Adjustment Layer icon at the top of the Layers panel, or you could go to Layer and come down to New Fill Layer and select Solid Color. Either way will result in the same layer being created. So I click. I'm going to rename this newly created layer Frame. F-R-A-M-E. Press Enter or click the OK button. This results in the Color Picker tool coming up, allowing us to select a color for this layer. The color we choose at this point in the tutorial is really unimportant. It just needs to be some reasonable color. So I'm going to select a dark green. So I click in the green area, come over to the Find selection, and I'll pick a dark green, click OK. So now we have a dark green layer hiding our background layer containing the three girls. We have a brush selected that's 100 pixels, and it's a very thin line brush. And you can see on the screen it's just this thin vertical line. I want to paint on the layer mask for our frame layer, and to ensure that I have the mask selected, I'll click on it on the layers panel, but you can also see the cyan border around the mask indicating it is selected. Now before we start painting, I want to set some parameters for this brush in addition to its size of 100 pixels. So I'll click on the brush settings button in the brushes options panel, and I'm going to set the scatter value to 3%. So I'll click and just drag over that 0 and put a 3. And then in the spacing, I want to set that for 300%. And then I'll just click outside somewhere on a blank area to close that panel. And then I'll place the brush on the screen, not getting too close to the edge. I'm going to typically stay about a ½ inch away from any side and click and drag. And see how it scatters that line? And I'll click and drag again, and once again, and maybe once again. And I'd really like to expose a little bit more of the picture, so I'll click and drag the other direction. And I'm just doing this randomly, and maybe I need to be a little more over to the side. And then I'm going to take the brush and change its settings again. So I'll click on brush settings, and I'll come down here to the bottom, and we had the settings by default at 0 degrees. I'm going to change it to 90 degrees. So our brush will now be a horizontal brush rather than a vertical brush. Again, I'll click out here on the blank area to close that dialog, and I'll click and drag down from the top, and down from the top again, and maybe out a little closer to the edge. I'm trying to get the edges to really look like a brush. And then maybe I'll click a few extra times in the center to expose the actual image a little better. Then I'll go back to the brush settings once again and set it for 0 degrees. Again, click outside to close the brush. Now I'm just trying to clean the center up so that the girls are more visible, and I'm trying to make more of a frame. I think I'll get down here at the bottom so that got a little close, but I think you've got the idea. So I think I like that frame, and you can see in the mask of the frame layer what we've been doing. You can see the black there. I would now like to select a color other than this green. So I'll click on the thumbnail for the frame layer that is not the mask, but it's actually the color. And you see that the cyan border is around it. And I'm going to actually double click, and now I can choose the color I like, and you see we have green selected. But if I clicked on the blue, for example, you can see how we have changed the image to a blue frame. I don't care for that blue, but I can also move the mouse out onto the screen, and I can click on a color on our image. So I'll click on the green of the skirt of the center girl, and I think that's too light. I'll click on the red of the skirt of the left-hand girl. I like that. I think I'll try the very dark maroon or dark red areas of the skirt of the girl at the right. Click there, and I think I like that better. I could have cleaned the center of the image up just a little bit more, but I'll finish with the color first. I'll click OK, and then I can again select the mask, make sure I have the brush, and I can just go, whoops, I really went over the edge here on the left. All I have to do is click on the undo button down here in the task panel to back off of that, and then I'll just do a little scrubbing in the center to clean the center of the image up a little better. But I like to keep this really ragged edge around the image. I'm sorry I went a little too far down here at the bottom, but I think that you've got the idea. We can always fill this mask with white again on the layers panel for the frame layer, then start over with our painting of the black strokes and recreate this entire mask. There's one additional feature we can add to this tutorial. Instead of having the heavy dark border around the edge, we can lighten it and give it some translucency so that the background picture actually shows through by making sure we have the frame layer selected, clicking on the opacity, and I'm dragging using the scrubby down to about 75%, and you can see that through the border you can see the background image. I hope this tutorial has been informative. Thanks for watching.